Hi everyone, welcome to Diving Deep. I'm your host, Michael Gannaway, and we are continuing our deep dive and digging up of the book of Numbers. Okay, we have completed 18 chapters thus far, and now we're ready to start chapter 19. So if you've been following along, please turn there. Okay. This chapter deals with the laws of purification. Okay. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is the ordinance of the law, which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come." Okay. A red heifer. That's very rare and a very specific request. So, that right there should tell you this is something very special. Okay. It says, "You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered there." Okay. It says that he may take it outside the camp. No, not taking it to be slaughtered in the tabernacle as an offering, but outside the camp. So that should tell you uncleanness is involved. You know, all unclean. With lepers, all the unclean people must be kept outside of the camp. So, that right there gives you a clue as to what this sacrifice is about. Okay. Alright. So take it outside the camp. Be slaughtered before him, and Eleazar, the priest, shall take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times, directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting. Now remember, 7 is the number of completion. Okay. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight, its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast them into the midst the fire, burning the heifer. All right. As I said before, this all has to do with uncleanness because it's outside of the camp. So what's the significance of cedar, hyssop, and scarlet? 3 things. Cedar, that represents the cross, according to Galatians 3:13. Scarlet represents the blood, and the blood is used for atonement. That's Leviticus 17:11. And finally, hyssop, that has to do with faith, according to Exodus 12:22. So, you got the cross, you have the atonement, and by faith. So, what do we believe here? Well, blood was shed on the cross for our atonement. And we receive atonement, we receive cleanliness through faith. That is what's being represented here with this red heifer offering. Everything just points to Jesus. So many signposts to look for. And when you study the Torah, the law, you got to have this mindset that there are signposts everywhere pointing to Jesus, and you got to think, how might this be a signpost pointing to Jesus? Okay. All right. Verse 7. Then the priest shall wash his clothes. He shall bathe in water, and afterward he shall come up into the camp. The priest shall be unclean until evening. There you go. Uncleanness right there. Yeah. And the one who burns it shall wash his clothes in water, bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It is for purifying for sins. So, this water, is used as a means of purifying oneself, cleaning oneself, cleaning the unclean. Okay? Of course, as we all know, water cannot make you truly clean, as is on the inside. Again, this is a signpost. Jesus calls himself living water. Yeah. He refers to himself as water. Well, it's through Jesus that we receive purification. Again, another signpost here. All right. 10. And the one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It shall be a statute forever to the children of Israel and to the stranger who dwells among them. Now, did you catch that? Not just Israel, but to the stranger who dwells among them. This purification is not meant solely for Israel. It's for the outsiders, the Gentiles, like myself. Okay. 11. He who touches the dead body of anyone shall be unclean for 7 days. He shall purify himself with the water on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself on the 3rd day, oh, did you catch that? The 3rd day. When was Jesus resurrected? On the 3rd day. And on the 7th day, he will not be clean. 13. Whoever touches the body of anyone who has died and does not purify himself defiles the tabernacle of the Lord. That person shall be cut off from Israel. He shall be unclean, because the water of purification was not sprinkled on him. His uncleanness is still on him. Now, what does it say? Our righteousness is as filthy rags. Doesn't matter how good you look on the outside. Without God's purification, you are still filthy. I am still filthy. But it's because of Jesus and his purification power that I am clean. Anybody can be clean by faith. 14. This is the law: when a man dies in a tent, all who come into the tent and all who are in the tent shall be unclean 7 days, and every open vessel which has no cover fastened on it is unclean. Whoever in the open field touches one who is slain by a sword or who has died, or a bone of a man or a grave, shall be unclean 7 days. Yeah, I'm sensing a common theme here. Death is unclean. Even just touching dead bones or a grave makes you unclean. God is not a God of death. God is the conqueror of death. Jesus conquered death. Yes. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Okay. 17. And for an unclean person, they shall take some of the ashes of the heifer, burnt for purification from sin, and running water shall be put on them in a vessel. A clean person shall take the hyssop and dip it in the water. Sprinkle it on the tent and all the vessels, on the persons who were there, or on the one who touched the bone, the slain, the dead, or a grave. The clean person shall sprinkle the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he shall purify himself, wash his clothes, and bathe in water, and at evening he shall be clean. But the man who is unclean and does not purify himself, that person shall be cut off from the assembly, because he has defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. Now, that's something we have to be aware of. When we come into the house of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, we need to come clean. We need to be clean. We need to wash ourselves by the Word and by the Spirit, and we need to confess any wrongdoings we've done. Lest we defile, God's holy places. We got to keep this in mind. We always got to be aware of how we're doing. We just can't always assume, oh, hey, everything's good. I'm okay the way I am. No, we should always be examining ourselves. It's like, is there anything I could have missed? All right. 21. It shall be a perpetual statute for them. He who sprinkles the water of purification shall wash his clothes, and he who touches the water of purification will be unclean until evening. Whatever the unclean person touches shall be unclean. Oh, did you get that? Whatever the unclean person touches shall be unclean. When someone offers to lay hands on you, don't just let anybody lay hands on you. Because if someone who is unclean, not of God, lays hands onto you, you could wind up with the wrong kind of anointing. So be very careful. And if someone is eager to lay hands on you, I'd be very cautious of that person. All right. Whatever the unclean person touches shall be unclean, and the person who touches it shall be unclean until evening. Okay. That concludes chapter 19. Now we'll go to chapter 20. All right. Now, here in chapter 20, we've actually fast-forwarded about 38 years from the time God declared that the current generation of Israel shall not enter to God's rest. So, by this time, they've been out wandering for 38 years. And you'll notice nothing's been written about those 38 years. As one teacher put it, there wasn't much to write it. There must not have been much to cover during that time. It's understandable. You got a generation of people knowing that they're stuck out in the wilderness because they can't enter in, and they're just kind of waiting to die. Yep, not much happening. But, okay, I digress. Keep in mind, the plan was to let folks, 20 and under, that was going to be the generation that would inherit it, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb. So, the next generation was probably being born and raised during this time. That's pretty much that pretty much was the primary purpose of the wilderness time, preparing the next generation. You know, regardless of how the unfaithful generation felt about it. Okay. Chapter 20, verse 1. Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. So Miriam has passed on. You know, she was one of those who was meant to be outside of the promised land, not to inherit it. Okay. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron, and the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, "If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink." They just don't learn. They just don't learn. They still complain. They just don't learn. They're still complaining to Moses, saying, "Why have you brought us out here?" He says, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt?" You know what I find hilarious? It's this. When talking about the wilderness, it says, "It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates." Well, you know where they could have found that stuff in the promised land? Had they just simply believed. Had they just simply trusted God, they could have had it. So with that knowledge, who are they to complain about not having that stuff when they had the chance and they blew it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so verse 6. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces. Now, this is something Moses always does in the face of confrontation and conflict. Throws himself on his face before the Lord. While all these Israelites are complaining and just haughtiness and entitlement and pride, Moses is a humble man. He humbly throws himself before God and waits for an answer from Him. Yeah, because he knows he can't. He knows he can't do this by himself. All right, so Moses and Aaron throw themselves on their faces. The glory of the Lord appeared to them. Verse 7. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron. Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals." So, despite this generation being disqualified, and despite the constant complaining, God is still their provider, and He still provides. Yeah. God is a merciful God. Providing for the people even when they don't, quote, deserve it. Yeah. God is still faithful to what He promised, and that is to be a provider. We got to believe this. We got to believe in His provision, even when we don't see it, when we want to see it. Okay. All right. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock?" Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Okay. So, for enough water to come out of a rock, I mean, we're not talking about like a rock that can fit in your hand. We got to be talking about, you know, a rock as probably a boulder as big as me. This is a big rock. You know, keep that in mind. Big rock. Okay, so Moses strikes the rock and with his rod, and then verse 12, then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. So, with one bad choice, Moses finds himself disqualified from entering the promised land. The one thing Moses wanted more than anything else. Well, it's now one might be saying, okay, Moses struck the rock and instead of speaking to the rock, and God says, because you didn't believe me. Well, how's that unbelief? Well, Joyce Meyer said it best. She said, disobedience is unbelief. Yeah. I mean, it is. Belief isn't just simply, a mental state you're in or an emotional state you're in. Belief is reflected by your actions. I mean, if you believe prayer is powerful and effective and yet you don't pray, then you really don't believe it's powerful or effective. Yeah. That's one example. So that's important to remember. Disobedience is unbelief. And Moses, he had the highest position of authority amongst the nation of Israel. And as it's spoken, as much has been given, so will much be required. Moses was held to a higher standard. And this act of unbelief, which, by the way, is what kept the rebellious generation out of the promised land, unbelief, results in him being disqualified too. Yeah. Now, what's the significance of this? Why is it so important that Moses speak to the rock as opposed to striking it, which he did previously, which God told him to do? Well, the rock represents Jesus. Yeah. He is the rock, the chief cornerstone. You build your house on the rock, your house stands firm. Now, the first time water came out of the rock, Moses struck it. Well, that striking refers to Christ being struck on the cross. Yeah. But now the second time, God says, "Speak to the rock." And what that means is, after Christ has been struck and he's been resurrected, now we have full access to the Father through him. And all we have to do is just come and speak to the Father. And through Jesus we have access. But Moses struck the rock a second time. And if you were to read in Hebrews, the writer mentions that you can't crucify Jesus twice. Yeah. Christ cannot be crucified twice. So that by striking the rock a second time, that's symbolic of crucifying Christ twice. Okay. Moving on. Verse 13, this was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them. Okay. Meribah, by the way, means contention. Yeah. Okay, verse 14. This is the passage through Edom. Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel. The Israelites are brothers to the descendants of Edom, because those are the descendants of Esau. Israel are the descendants of Jacob. You know all the hardship that has befallen us, how our fathers went down to Egypt, and we dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians afflicted us and our fathers. When we cried out to the Lord, he heard our voice and sent the angel and brought us up out of Egypt. Now here we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Please let us pass through your country. We will not pass through fields or vineyards, nor will we drink water from wells. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left until we have passed through your... Did you catch that? We will not turn aside to the right or to the left. That's the path we should be walking. The king's highway, straight and narrow. Straight and narrow. No veering to the right or to the left. Moses is just outlining, how we should be living right here in this message. Okay. 18. Then Edom said to him, you shall not pass through my land, lest I come out against you with a sword. So the children of Israel said to him, we will go by the highway, and if I or my livestock drink any of your water, then I will pay for it. Let me only pass through on foot, nothing more. Then he said, you shall not pass through. So Edom came out against them with many men, with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory, so Israel turned away from him. All right. They were apparently not meant to pass through Edom. If they were meant to pass through Edom, God would have helped them defeat the Edomites, but it just didn't happen. Okay. Now, verse 22. Now the children of Israel, the whole congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah. Okay. So Aaron is about to die outside of the promised land. And that's all the time we have for today. We shall pick up right here in our next segment. Until then, God bless.